project and working on the ECC part.
Okay.
So basically looking for this Fiori security which are going implement. So
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. So I have already spoken to Pawan and Ashish already. We had a session which we started. So I believe all of you have gone through the demo video. But anyways, I'm going to start with the same topic again, where I'll explain the agenda, and I'll go through the S4 HANA database part. Okay, and let's see if you have any questions. Maybe we can answer them, and when from next session onwards, we will move ahead with actually doing pretty cool stuff with the database, like loading of the tables and start with information views and all this stuff. Okay, so let me start the presentation. Let me introduce you myself. My name is Raghu. I have 13 plus years of experience, all in the area of infrastructure security, which covers GRC, which covers Fiori, which covers a lot of other stuff like HCM, SuccessFactors, and all that. I'm a certified PIM consultant. I have worked on a lot of greenfield, brownfield implementations as well. I have AMS experience where you handle with all those tickets and incidents and all that. We have worked with upgrades and rollouts as well. So Fiori, I've been working on UI5 Fiori implementation from past 4 years now. I've done 2 full cycle implementations on Fiori, and one of them being Fiori first, right? So okay, let's start with the agenda. So I know it may be a repetition for a couple of you guys, but anyways, as the crowd is bigger than what I had initially intended, so let's go with the agenda and let's see if you have any doubts over the agenda again. So we will start with database security. So when we talk about S4 HANA security, it's a combination of your database part and on the application part. The application part mainly being Fiori, right? So that is your new application layer. So when we talk about S4 HANA application security, we will talk about Fiori, and we will not talk about the ECC part or the core security, the PFCG, the user administration, the role administration, the object level restrictions, and all that. Although we can touch upon those things if you want to, but what I am going to do is I'm going to skip into Fiori security, and as and when we come across such issues where you require clarity on how exactly it is done, we will skip back to application side and we will cover that as well. Okay, so the first part would be the HANA database security. So we will talk about the architecture in a very brief manner, which is relevant for more security practitioners. We will talk about the specialities of HANA database, how it is improved over the other databases which we have in the market, say Oracle or DB3, DB2 or whatever, right? So how HANA is more luring for the clients and why it is so much in demand in the market right now. We will look into those aspects of HANA before we start the technical part. Then we will look at the overview of how we will be doing it, right? We will talk about HANA Studio. Primarily, our work environment will be on HANA Studio. Although we do have Web IDE, I will go through the Web IDE, but when we are actually doing the practical sessions, we will be using HANA Studio. So the way we have envisioned this particular curriculum is that we have our own tables, we create our own schemas. Okay, we will talk about what schemas are and all those things, but just hear me out. So we'll create our own schemas, we will have our own tables, we'll have our own data, and on top of that data, we will start building our information views, and on those information view, we will build our security. Okay, so that's how I have envisioned this program, and it has been successful for quite a few batches which we have done so far. So I think we got very positive feedback as well. I think it is good if we have our own information or if we have our own tables so that you can relate to what we are actually doing. Okay, so once we get good hands-on on what the HANA Studio is and how we can work around HANA Studio, we will skip into knowing what are information views. Although security practitioner primarily do not create information views. These are usually done by your BI or BW developers, but I have included this information views because that is what we are securing. So it becomes very important for a security consultant to know what exactly he's securing and how it all comes together in a bigger picture. So that's why we have to learn about these information view, how many types of information views are there, how are we going to build them, or how the BW consultants will build them. Okay, we will also build them. We will have practical sessions about building your information views. So we will look at that. And then we will come down into our core aspects of HANA security. So we will look at privileges. We will look at all the standard privileges, and we will also take a deep dive into analytical privilege, which we will be building. So analytical privileges will be built on top of your information views. So that's why I put information view first. Then we will, although I have not mentioned the entire details in the agenda, but rest assured it will be covered. So we have your roles. So we will look into what are roles, what are the type of roles, what is the recommendation, how do we create roles, how do we transport roles, all those things will be covered in the role concept. Then we have user management. What are the types of users? You should also consider the population of users logging onto a database is very, very minimum. So it becomes that much more important to have it in a secured way. So whatever users log in, they should have a very secured, very restricted, very need to know or need to have access only. So we will look at the user management aspects in detail when we come to this topic. Okay, so those are the headers for your HANA database security. Any questions on this, or do you think we are missing anything, or do you need any clarity on this, or do you have any questions? Most welcome. Anyone?
Hi, this is Mon. Actually, I just wanted to like for S4 HANA, the front end is Fiori and the backend is HANA. Is it true?
True. The backend, when you say backend is always your application layer, right? So your application layer is your Fiori. So it's the same box as your ECC, what you have to do. So it's the same thing. So we have multiple ways of deploying Fiori. One is embedded model, where your Fiori sits on top of your HANA, your ABAP stack, right? When what we call as a AS ABAP system, right? So that is what is your backend. The actual backend, where the data lies, is your database. We are not talking about that backend. So when we talk about an application layer, it also has a backend system. It also has a gateway system, which is a front-end system. But there are multiple ways of deploying. So your Fiori system can sit on top of your AS ABAP system, which is called as an embedded model. Or your AS ABAP system can be different than your Fiori box, which is called as a hub, central hub deployment. Okay, we'll talk about that when we come to your Fiori part. Okay, but database is not your backend. It is your repository of data, right? When we talk about a backend system, we talk about how the application backend system. We are talking about an application backend system, which is your AS ABAP system. Any other? Did I answer your question, Monica? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, so let's look at what we are going to cover in Fiori. So Fiori is very, very exciting. So we will first introduce or get acclimatized to what Fiori is, why it was brought in. Okay, all those aspects, the flashy aspects of Fiori, we will look at that. Then we will, as I said earlier, we have multiple ways of deploying. There are two ways to be precise. One is a central hub model, and one is an embedded model. So we will look at both types of deployment, and whatever topics follow that particular the second hub deployment or embedded. The other topics which falls below are always split into two ways, right? Whenever you develop a role, the role development will be different for a central hub and it will be different for your embedded. So we will look at that parallelly. As and when we go forward, we will look at both the aspects of deploying and maintenance as well. So how would you do it in a hub deployment model? How would you do it in an embedded? So all of them will be relatively along the course. We will look into all those aspects based on these two views. Okay, then we will step into user shoes and we will see what is there for the user. Okay, what is the launchpad, what is the designer, what are the personalization options which the user get, how can we control the personalization and all those. Okay, and then we will get into more technical details, like what is a Fiori app. Okay, what are its components, what are the elements inside of an app. We have a launcher, we have a tile. It's a little confusing at first, but we will clarify all your doubts about what is a target map, what is an app, what is a tile, what is a launcher, all those things will be covered in the Fiori apps and disk design. And we will also look at what are the types of apps. Okay, there are various types of apps and various ways of categorizing these apps. Okay, there is no one fixed way of categorizing a role. For example, for a PFCG role, what are the types of PFCG role? There are many categories, right? There are many categories of a PFCG role. One way of categorizing is a master derived role. The other way of categorizing it is a single and composite role. Like this, you have apps as well where it falls under different categories. We will look at all those types of apps. Okay, then we will take a deeper dive into the technical architecture of Fiori, where we try to understand what are the building blocks of Fiori. What are catalogs? What are groups? How we build catalog? How we group the catalogs? How are groups formed? All those aspects will fall under the catalogs and groups territory. Okay, we will have extensive practical sessions in creating these catalogs and groups. Multiple ways of creating these catalogs. We will look at all those things. How can we build a catalog on the designer? How can we build a catalog on the backend system? We'll all look at all those aspects. Then we will see how exactly Fiori, the groups and catalogs, and our PFCG roles are married together, right? So what are the various factors affecting the user's access of Fiori? How can it be controlled? Okay, where can it be controlled? All those aspects we'll be learning into your PFCG integration, Fiori and PFCG merger of PFCG. We will look at that. How it is done on a hub deployed model, how it can be done on an on-prem or an embedded deployment model. We'll look at those. We'll also look at what are OData. Okay, although we will not be developing any OData services here, but we will be using the ones which are developed, ones which are readily available. We will look at how we can use them. Okay. Then we will see there are multiple approaches to deploy Fiori, right? It's different than your hub and embedded. That's the technical approach. But here, it's a conceptual one where the clients can select how to approach Fiori. Will it be a showcase approach or a cherry picking or a Fiori first approach or a hybrid model? So we will look at all these. So these are your talking points with your clients. So when you are faced with a discussion where they want to go with Fiori, but they don't know how to go, how to proceed. So this is where this topic will help you. So should it be a Fiori showcase approach, or should it be a cherry picking? Should it be Fiori first? What are the advantages and disadvantages of all these approaches? We will look at that. Then we will look at new tools which are available. Some of the tools are made available with Fiori 3.0. Some of them are already available, which have been improvised in 3.0. So we will look at all those content manager, intent analysis, and all those tools here. Then we will take a short jab at activate methodology. Although activate methodology is a big topic, we will not cover the entire methodology as such. We will only look at rapid activation part of Fiori, which is directly relevant to Fiori deployment. Okay, we'll talk about what is rapid activation, how it is helpful, and how it can be done. Okay, well, all those things we will look into the SAP activate methodology. Then we will look at new interesting things like application cards, spaces and pages, which are not yet released. It will probably come with 2020 FPS 2 probably, which is slated to come in September or June, July, somewhere around that. It's not yet on, it's already available for cloud. I do have access to a cloud system. I can share the screenshots of all those and how the spaces and pages work. How it can be replaced with a group, or does it replace the group in the first place? We'll try to answering all those questions here. Then we will see what is Fiori roadmap. What does SAP say how a client should approach their Fiori deployment or Fiori implementation? What is SAP's roadmap? Okay, it's a short topic of 15 minutes. We will see recommendations from SAP and we will move forward. Then the troubleshooting of Fiori, although it is split across the entire curriculum, I just put it at the bottom. We will look at the errors, we will look at error handling, we will look at tracing, we will look at the T codes which are important, we will look at the services, we will look at the SICF nodes, OData services, where can we see them, where can the activation be done, all those things throughout the course, not just at the end of the course, it will be done throughout the course. Okay, any questions here? Or did I miss out anything which you want to be included? So there are multiple topics which are a little higher than the curriculum, like embedded analytics, right? We are not covering embedded analytics. I believe it is over this course. I mean, it's something which is different, which comes after this part. This is the foundation for Fiori. embedded analytics, the CDS part of Fiori will come after the foundation is laid. So I have not included that part here. So apart from that, any other questions?
Can I get a request?
Sure.
Okay, so what usually happens for me is that I add the tile catalogs and groups on my PFCG roles on the gateway system, and then I always ask for the service name. It doesn't get added automatically, which should happen on S4. I would really like to see the connection there.
Yeah, sure. We'll answer that. Definitely answer that.
Thank you.
Yep. So it's part of your task activation. Okay. So it's a very simple thing. So there are 2 or 3 tasks which has to be run when the basis team is setting up the system for Fiori, right? One is called as Fiori Foundation task. Okay. The other one is for rapid activation. So when we talk about rapid activation, the Fiori Foundation task, if it is run properly with all the attributes checked, and when you add the catalog, the services will be automatically included. If you don't, the services will not be included. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or can we straight away start with the first topic of HANA Database Security?
Go on, sure.
I have one request. I hate monologues. Okay, I've been telling this to every batch of mine. I like it to be an interactive session. Just if you nod, if you just hum, that's more than an acknowledgement for me. Absolute silence is sometimes I feel that okay, I'm disconnected. Okay, I sometimes I feel I'm not audible at all. So please have an interactive. Let's have an interactive session. Okay, let's be vocal about your doubts. It doesn't matter what kind of a doubt it is, still a doubt, right? So let's be interactive. Let's have a dialogue and not a monologue. So that's a humble request from my side. I hope it's okay with you guys.
Totally. I'm okay to proceed with HANA as long as everybody else is comfortable. Thank you, Raghu.
Thanks, Pawan.
Fine by me as well.
Okay. So let's start. Okay, I think I put Fiori first. Let me skip to HANA. Okay.
Raghu, before we start, I also have a question that we would be covering the implementation topics, right, for HANA DB and S4?
What do you mean by implementation topics?
Like if you have a new client coming up for a requirement of implementation, so well, as a security consultant or as a HANA DB consultant, what are the protocols we follow and what would be the roadmap towards installing the DB?
Not entirely, but we will discuss about the talking points of whenever there is a important topic going on, I will highlight that, okay, this may be a talking point with your client. Okay, so we cannot cover that in a separate section altogether because it's going to be huge, right? So whenever there is a discussion with the client, it's not like it's a standard. We do not follow a set of standards here. Okay, it's always a negotiation with the client, right? So, but there are few points which are important when you discuss, or there are few talking points which you can take from this course, and you can, while discussing with your clients, that will be of very good help. But I cannot put it in a separate section and say that, okay, this is what you need to talk, because it's always a negotiation. It's never a standard.
Right. From an interview perspective, as for my personal experience, they are looking for someone who's hands-on. Like you said, you're already implemented a couple of systems, right? So your experience and the roadmap which you had from scratch would help us,
I'll definitely share that. That's what this course is all about. Sharing my experience. Right. Yes, definitely, yes.
Okay, Raghu, that should be good. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, let's start. So let's see what HANA Database Security is. So earlier, let's say like 10 years back, a SAP security consultant was supposed to know PFCG. You're supposed to know SU01. That's done. right? Now the word has changed. It's not just about your application or app security, right? A security consultant is expected to know how the database administration happens. Not the entirety of database administration, but at least the security part of database administrations is required by a security consultant. You use it or you don't use it, it doesn't matter, right? When you are in a project, okay, most of the things are shared between multiple teams. There will be clients involved, there will be basis team involved, there will be DB administrators involved. But when you are entering into the market, right, it is expected that you know the database security part. Okay, so we will cover as much as possible of the entire database security part, which is relevant for a SAP security administrator to know. So earlier, gone are the days where there was a separate DB administrator, right? It's all tied together in a security administrator's job now, that you secure your database as well. Okay, so with that in mind, so let's dig deep into what SAP HANA is, right? So we will answer what is HANA and what is the difference between HANA and S4 HANA later. Okay, but let's see what is SAP HANA. So HANA, as you can see on the screen, it's an acronym for High Performance Analytical Appliance. It's a database, period. HANA is a database, but HANA is more than a database. It's not just a database, it acts as a platform. Okay, it acts as a platform for multiple applications to run on top of itself. Okay, and there are multiple technologies which are imbibed into HANA database, which makes it possible. Okay, so I have taken out few very important aspects of HANA and try to explain it in a very, very light way, or you can say that very understandable way, that what a in-memory is, what is row column store, what is compression, what is the architecture. I've tried to put it in as condensed form as possible, so that it will be relatable. Okay, so the first word which you get when you type what is HANA on Google, probably you will see in-memory, right? So what is actually an in-memory database? Have anyone worked on the database part earlier?
No, not much.
Okay.
No,
okay. Okay, so let's see what an in-memory database is, and this is HANA is one of a kind. Okay, no other databases uses in-memory technology. Okay, so what is in-memory? So let's take a short example here, and let's say there is a person. Let's call him Praveen. Okay, so Praveen is a guy who sits in his office, and people come to his desk and with queries. Okay, so what does Praveen do when he gets a query? He goes to the rack which is next to his table. He picks up the file which contains the information which is requested. He gets those information on his table, and he looks for that record, right? And he gives it to the one who is requesting it. So here the rack serves as a database. Okay, so he takes the books, he takes the file and put it on his table. The table becomes his random access memory, where he can quickly refer through all those books. Okay, so that is his memory, and Praveen himself is the processor. So this is your basic three-tier architecture of a database model. So you have a database, you have a application, and you have a processor. So all these three put together is your client-server architecture, right? So now, will it not be convenient if all the books which are on the rack are directly on the table, right? So Praveen doesn't have to get up from his seat to go to the database and bring the file and come back, sit and look through it takes time, right? So it will be very, very convenient if all those books and files are on his table directly. But look at the number of books here. Okay, you cannot imagine all these books racked up on his table. It becomes even more difficult for Praveen. So will it not be a good idea if you condense the information? Okay, if you reduce or if you compress the information within all these books and files without losing the integrity of the data, and put a condensed data on the table. It is very, very convenient for Praveen to go through those, right? And he can serve the request very, very quickly, okay, compared to what he used to do when he used to get up to the rack and bring the book and all that, right? So he can process it very, very quickly. So that's what SAP thought. Okay, so what SAP did is they condensed all the information without compromising the data, right? Take off the blank pages, don't leave any spaces, and all those condensation or compression mechanism they applied here. They put it everything in a condensed way on his table so that Praveen can access it very, very quickly. So here, what happens? The memory and the database is merged into one. Okay, and your table here becomes your in-memory. That's exactly what HANA does. Okay, it's your in-memory. The memory on the database, you cannot differentiate the memory on the database and the data on the database and the data on the memory. It's one and the same. Okay, so there are again cache mechanisms which I don't want to get into. What kind of data gets onto the random access memory and what kind of data just sits around there in the cache and all those. Let's not go into that much detail. It's not required for us. So what here the key thing to understand is what is in memory and how does it increase the speed of processing, right? So this exactly what is happening here. So the data is now compressed and put on the table, which is the random access memory. That you cannot separate the memory and the database. Now it is all one. That's why it is called as in-memory database. Okay, so that's in memory. So to achieve the in-memory database, there are multiple other factors which help, right? So like optimization. Okay, how do you use the space and how do you process the queries in an optimum way, right? So there is another way of doing it. So there is another concept here of storage mechanism, right? Row store and column store. There are two ways of, there are only two ways, okay? How the data is saved on the database. There are only two ways. One is row store, the other one is column store. And HANA supports both of them, but the optimization is for column store. Okay, column store, although it was introduced way before, but no one ever cared to implement the column store and optimize it in their database. Okay, so there are a lot of advantages of having a column store mechanism to store your data. Okay, let's look at what a row store and column store is so that you get a better understanding of this. So I've taken a small data set here. Okay, this is a small data set of a library where you have an ID, you have a first name, and you have the name of the book which has been borrowed, right? Now, in a row store mechanism, all these rows become one record. Okay, so this is actually how you see it on when you display the data, right? When you display the data, you always look at it in a spreadsheet. But this is not exactly how it is saved on the database. The database will require a lot of memory to save this spreadsheet as is. So what the database does is it converts the spreadsheet into records. So in a row store mechanism, each of the row becomes one record, like this. So each of the row becomes one record here. So now let's throw a query to this. Okay, so I want to see how many or what are the books which have been borrowed. Okay, I don't want the names, I don't want the IDs. I just want to see how many books or what are the books which have been borrowed. So for this, for processing this query, the processor or the parser has to go through all three records here, right? Because the name of the book is contained in all the three records. So if it takes 1 second to parse through one record, the total amount of time required is 3 seconds here. Okay, so that's how the record is being parsed. So even though I throw a small query of the books, or even if I ask for the name of the students who have borrowed books, it takes the same amount of time, right? 3 seconds. Now let's compare it with column store. Okay, as you might have guessed, column store is every column has its own record, something like this. Now if I throw the same query here, I only need 1 second, right? It has to only go through one record here. Now you might see that, okay, both of them at some point of time becomes one and the same, right? There may be queries which requires to parse through all the columns and all that. But remember, a rule of thumb is the number of columns is always finite. Okay, how many headers can you have, right? The headers will always be finite. The only thing which is increasing or growing is the number of rows. Okay, the name will remain there. Okay, the name, the books, the headers will still be there, but the names keep on increasing, the books keep on increasing. So there is the infinite ways of increasing your rows, but not your columns. Your columns are always finite. There are examples where the columns can also be added, but that's very rare, right? So if you have a citizen database, the number of how many columns can you have, right? You can have name, social security, you can have marital status, children, all that, but still it is finite. But the number of people which keeps on adding to that database is infinite, or it keeps on growing. It's a moving target. So that's why a column store becomes very, very efficient in processing these kind of data. Okay, is this one clear? Or any questions here?
Clear, yes.
Clear.
Okay, so let's look at let's look at compression. Okay, so we talked about compression a lot. Okay, how do you compress? What are the factors included in compression? So there are multiple ways of selecting what to compress and what not to compress. We will not talk about the factors which are influencing the compression, but we will see compression on its own. What exactly means, what exactly do you mean by compression? This is not new to HANA. Let me be clear. This is not new to HANA, but this becomes very much important for HANA because we have your column store, right? Because you have your column store, the compression becomes more. I mean, the rate of compression, if you compare with other database, maybe some other database like Oracle have 10x compression, while HANA may support more than 20x of compression here. Let's see what compression is and how this is a generic thing of compression. This is applicable for all databases, but clubbed with column store, HANA becomes, the compression rate of HANA becomes extremely high. Okay, let's look at what compression is. I've taken a similar kind of a data here. Okay, now there are two things which you need to concentrate. This is about data. Okay, so always a string type takes more space on a database compared to a integer. Okay, the string type takes more data compared to a integer. This is point number one. So what will be the optimum way of compressing, right? Look at this data set. You see a lot of duplicates here, right? The names are duplicated as well as the books are duplicated. Now, the optimum way of compressing is to remove all duplicates without losing the integrity. I shouldn't lose the information that, okay, Rohan has 2 books, but I need to negate the names coming up twice. I have to remove the duplicates. These two things put together, what compression does, okay? So the first thing is it will create a vector table. Okay, a vector table is something where it replaces the duplicates or take out the unique values and assign an integer to it. So that's exactly what has been done here. Okay, first vector table is that of a student where a unique integer is assigned to each of the students' name, and then a book. Okay, each of the books have been taken and assigned a unique integer to it. So now this serves as your vector table. Now to the actual database or to the actual data, let's replace the values with your vectors. So now then this is called as a compressed set of data which is available. Although you see duplicates here, the duplicates is in conjunction with your vector table. It's not independent. Okay, it's both are together. So whenever you run a record or whenever you run a query, both the tables are being accessed and the data will be given back, right? So it may not look very luring, if I can say, but let's take a real world example here. Okay, let's take a real world example. Let's take a population set of say 5 crore people, okay, or say 50 million people. Okay, now if I want to have a citizenship database just with the names, okay, just with the names, each name will take 50 bytes. It's an approximate calculation. Okay, it cannot put a scale to it, just an approximate calculation, but the ratio is proper. Okay, don't worry about the ratio, which will come later. So let's say every name has 50 bytes of space acquiring or taking that much of space in your database. So to have a 50 million user database, I would be using somewhere around 350 gigabytes of data onto my database, right? Now, if I apply the ways of compression here, what happens here? Now, firstly, I am removing all the duplicates and I'm putting it in a vector table. Okay, how many unique names will you have? Out of 50 million, maybe 5 million are unique names. Okay, not all 50 million can be unique, right? Not all 50 million names can be a unique names, right? So I'll remove the duplicates. Let's take 5 million unique names are available. I assign it to a vector table and I replace it with the integer, right? So now my integer table or every integer will take a 23 bits of space. Okay, along with the actual data, which is now replaced with all integers, which will take 20 gigabytes plus 200 MB of my vector table. It will become close to 21 gigabytes of data, and I am not compromising on the integrity of the data. Look at the ratio of compression, right? It is huge. So instead of like 350 books, I am only keeping 21 books on the table, but all the information is available. So that's how compression becomes very, very important. And when it is clubbed with your column store, the rate of processing each of the record becomes very, very faster, very fast in terms of processing, or in terms of returning a query, a result to a query. It becomes very, very fast, and clubbed with the compression rate, HANA becomes very, very good in terms of data retrieval as well. Okay. Any questions here on the compression? Is it clear?
Perfectly clear.
Great, great. Okay, so those are the main attributes of what makes HANA special, right? Now let's look at the architecture of HANA in a very simplistic way, and we will also look at MDC concept, which was brought in by HANA, in HANA 2.0. MDC, what is MDC? We'll look at that. Okay, so let's take a look at the traditional system first. Okay, so you have Oracle DB, okay, or any other database for that matter. Then you have an application layer, okay, which can be your SAP ECC or your Oracle Financials or your JD Edwards, whatever it is, right? Then you have your presentation layer. It can be a website, it can be SAP GUI, it can be Fiori, it can be whatever, right? You have 3 layers in a traditional way, right? Now, what happens in HANA? So when I say HANA acts as a platform, right? So it converts your 3-tier architecture into 2-tier architecture. So now you have a HANA platform. This entire application layer sits on top of your Oracle DB, or sorry, on your database itself, which is your HANA database. Now you're cutting down on entire layer of your architecture, and you only have the presentation layer to go with, right? Your presentation layer can be anything, and your application and your database are merged into one. Okay, so that is how your HANA database and your HANA application layer works in synchronization. So the data retrieval is faster, right? You don't have another application layer to worry about. Okay, all that will come under your HANA platform. So that's how HANA becomes more than a database. It becomes your platform. So we are moving from a 3-tier standard architecture into a 2-tier architecture. So that's about HANA architecture. There is a lot to HANA architecture which may not be relevant, so I have to skip that all. Okay, it's more of a basis administration kind of an activity. You don't have to know this. We only have to secure it, right? So now let's look at what a MDC is, right? MDC is for multi-tenant data containers. Okay, this was brought in with HANA 2.0. So first, let's look at the challenges of not having a multi-tenant data container. Okay, so you have your standard system. So first you will have your storage, right? Your storage will be clubbed with your OS or your hardware, and then you have your traditional database. All this is considered as a database, but I'm just split into multiple 3 parts, right? Now I need to deploy 2 applications on my database. So how do I do it, right? One way of is, this is very, very theoretical. It is not practical at all, right? So I need 2 Fiori and CRM applications to run on the database. Now what I'm saying is purely theoretical. It cannot be implemented. So one way of doing it is schema. Okay, multiple schemas for multiple applications, or you can split this database into 2 different databases instead of a schema. Just consider them as database itself, which are sharing your resources or sharing your hardware and storage. We have 2 different databases. The maintenance doubles here, right? And you assign one of the schema or the database to each of the applications, and you deploy your 2 applications. So that is the traditional way of doing it. Now, what is the demerit of having this kind of a thing? So this is what was happening even before HANA 2.0. Okay, so we have multiple databases here structured within, and then each of the application will have its own database, which are sharing the hardware and OS. Okay. So now let's look at the demerits. It's not scalable. Okay, the scalability depends on multiple applications all coming together, and you need to do all or you have to do none. Okay, so that's the catch for having this kind of an architecture. either you increase one or you increase all of them. You increase none of them or all of them. So that's the thing with your scalability problem. Then you cannot back it up separately. Okay, you cannot have a backup of application separately. If you have two different schema which is sharing a database, you have to back up both of them even if it is not required. Okay, then your policies and customizations cannot be done independently. So if you want to have a password policy for Fiori with 8 characters, and for CRM you want 10 characters, you can't do it, right? So it has to be done collectively at a database level. Then it's not suitable for cloud. Okay, it's not at all suitable for cloud because it is sharing a hardware and multiple schemas. The entire model itself is sketchy. Okay, for a cloud database storage, you need to have multi-tenant data containers. So that's why it is not suitable for cloud environment. So now, what is a multi-tenant data container? Okay, you know about tenants, right? They rent out a space. So that's exactly what multi-tenant data containers are. You have an entire HANA system that is a 2.0 system. That itself is a database, entire database, and there are rented databases within that. Okay, these are called as tenant databases. You have one system database, then you have multiple tenants. There is no limit of how many tenants you have inside the HANA system. There can be multiple tenants. Okay, there is no limit. As long as your hardware supports, you can have those many tenants. There is no number restriction to the number of tenants you can have. Each tenant acts as a separate database on its own. Okay, each tenant acts as a separate database on its own, but there is a central control mechanism called as a system database. So what happens now? If you want to back up separately, you can do it. You can back up. You want to back up the entire thing, you can do it from the system database. You want to apply policies separately, you can do it. If you want to apply policies for the entire set, you can do it here. Okay, that kind of flexibility is given in your multi-tenant data container. So all that you see now are multi-tenants. Okay, every tenant will have its own application hosted on top of it, but it can also be centrally controlled with the system database. Okay, so that's your multi-tenant data containers in a very brief. Okay, this is very brief. I don't want to overcomplicate things. There are many more things which we can do here, but I feel that for a security practitioner, this much is enough. Any other questions? Or do you think if I'm wrong, maybe if you need more, I can probably put more here.
Quick question, Raghu.
Yep.
So what are the challenges that you mentioned with the schema format is not there with this MDC concept?
No. Because these are treated as independent databases on its own.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. So these are separate databases on its own.
Got it. Thank you. And as you're an experienced person in today's world, is MDC the most common approach companies have, or is it still?
It's a now. If you ask me now, it's a given now. Every company will have MDCs. There is no other option for them, because this is like the only alternative to chaos. This, if I consider this as chaos, this is the only alternative. So everybody has multi-tenants. So there is no exception. So it's like 100%.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So now let's try to answer the most common question of what is S4 HANA and what is SAP HANA, right? So S4 HANA is a suite. It's a package. It's a suitcase of multiple products inside of it, right? When you talk about S4 HANA, it contains your HANA database. It contains your SAP system. It contains your Fiori. It can also contain multiple other products, but these three are the most basic ones. Okay. In your S4 HANA suite, it depends on what is required. Okay. If you are going to a mountain place, you may put a sweater or you may put a jacket. Okay. You can put all of the clothes inside of it with rain shoes or rain boots or whatever, right? If you are going to a beach, you will take out the sweater and you put your swimsuits and all those things. So just like that, the S4 HANA suite is totally customizable, but there are few constants to a S4 HANA suite. One is the SAP system. which is also called as S4HANA. That's where the confusion starts, right? Your AS system, it was earlier, the earlier version of a ABAP system was ECC 6.0, EHP, okay? Now it is also called as S4HANA, and the package also is called as S4HANA, right? Your AS system is also called as S4HANA system. Then you have your HANA database. These two are the constants of the suitcase of your suite, right? Fiori is optional, but most of them will go for Fiori as well. Okay, so these three components form your S4 HANA suite. Okay, so S4 HANA suite is your combination of your HANA database and your ABAP system. The ABAP system takes the name of the suitcase itself, right? The ABAP system takes the name as S4 HANA system itself. So, and the suite name is also S4 HANA. So the HANA database is one which is very, very common to your S4 HANA suite, right? So you upgrade from your ECC to your S4 HANA, which means that your application server, whatever was there, ECC 6.0, will be upgraded into your S4 HANA, which is your ABAP system. Okay, and the database will be your HANA database. Did I answer most of your questions here, or do you still have questions?
Raghu, can you explain this in a diagrammatic way, because it's really confusing?
Okay, I need to draw it up. Let me try.
Please. Because now, so do I consider Fiori and S4 HANA as the same, or no? That's my question.
Okay, let me try. I'm not an artist, but let me try. Okay, so this is your suite. Okay, this is your S4 HANA suite. Let me name it. Okay, so this entire thing is your S4 HANA suite. Okay, so this suitcase will contain multiple components inside of it. Okay, so the most common component, okay, if I can bundle it like this, okay, so now what is this? This is your HANA DB, and this is your ABAP system, or you can call it that ABAP, what do I call it? ABAP stack. Okay, the confusion starts because the ABAP stack is also called as S4 HANA. Okay, so these are your mandatory requirement in an S4 HANA suite. So whenever you say that I'm upgrading to S4 HANA, which means that you have a database, which is HANA, and you have a ABAP stack, which is also called as S4 HANA. Fiori is something which is optional. Why is Fiori optional? Because you can have Fiori on your ECC system as well. Okay, you can have without these two also, you can deploy Fiori. So that's why this is kept optional in your S4 HANA suite. This S4 HANA suite can be as big as the client want it to be, right? You can have multiple things over here. Okay, you can have your MTG, right? You can have your, what is that? MOC, MDG, your MOC, your IBP, which is a SaaS product. Okay, so all these are your, I'll stack it like this. Okay, so all these are your additional stuffs which if a client wants it, he can take it. If not,
basically
no.
Those are add-ons. Basically those
Yes,
are add-ons. If you need, you
exactly.
can add it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. but it is part of your S4 HANA Suite. I hope this is clear enough. Is it okay, or do you still have confusion?
Yes.
I will just sorry, Ashit, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Raghu, when you say ABAP stack, right, which is also referred as AS ABAP. So, in other words, am I correct to understand that the way systems gets upgraded? So now this ABAP stack or AS ABAP is the latest of what used to be ECC, EHP6, EHP7. So now
Exactly.
the next version, next stage of upgrade is known as AS ABAP.
No, AS ABAP is a common name. It's a technical name. The name is S4 HANA, like
Okay,
your
sorry,
ECC.
yeah, S4 HANA. So it's no longer EHP6, EHP7, but now
No.
it's called S4 HANA. Got it.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
So is that like more of a version you call it, because those are all versions?
Right.
Definitely yes. So it's
Got
more
it.
of an upgrade. Okay. So when we talk about an upgrade from, let's say, ECC 4.3 to ECC 6, it's an upgrade, right? Similarly, when you have your ECC and you want to upgrade, the next phase of your AS ABAP system is your S4 HANA. So that's your version. So it is SAP version 4. S4 is for SAP version 4, right? That's the 4th generation of your SAP ERP system. So that's what it is.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's nothing but it can also be said that it's an application layer, right?
It is an application layer. It is an application layer. But the thing is, this application layer sits on top of your HANA DB. Although the maintenance is done separately. Yeah, the maintenance is done separately. Just like you will not feel the difference on the face of it. For a security person, you cannot see it being one, right? You'll still see it as two different components. But at the back end, both are sharing the same platform, which is your HANA platform. Okay, Fiori can also sit on top of this. Okay, Fiori can also sit on top of this, or Fiori can be kept separately. So there are two ways of doing it.
And now, as per this diagram, Fiori should be your front end, right? Like the presentation layer.
Yes. So it's see, you cannot put it like that. You cannot make Fiori as your front end, because Fiori is something which is an add-on. Your front end can still be your AS ABAP stack, just like you had your ECC, right? Your SAP GUI can also be your front end. Fiori is something which comes on top of it. So when you have Fiori, doesn't mean that you cannot access GUI. You can still access GUI. You can also access Fiori. This is something which is given to your end users now. So it depends on how you are going to deploy Fiori. Will it be, let's say, if you are having a cherry picking model of Fiori, not every app will be deployed. Okay. There will be only select apps which can be deployed here, and the rest, they again lie on your SAP GUI to execute their ERP functionalities.
Okay, so that's a mandatory. The ABAP stack is a mandatory component, which you say, right?
No,
you can't.
This is mandatory for your S4 HANA Suite, not for Fiori. Fiori can be deployed on top of SGC. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, I hope this is clear. I'll keep this slide. Probably this will help me explain the other batches as well. Okay, great. Any other questions before we move into, let's see, Fiori? I wanted to touch upon what we are going to do in Fiori. I think we are already over time. So we will be starting Fiori after we complete our database part. Okay, so we will talk about all these aspects. So today we covered these parts, right? Tomorrow we will look at what a HANA Studio is, and I'll help you with the data which I have. You can also improvise on it. So it's all up to you. We'll see how we can create schema and all those things. We will walk through how we can use your HANA Studio efficiently, or what are the things. Sometimes HANA Studio, the tool itself, may be confusing. What is the perspective and all those things. Right? Some of you may be new to it. Some of you may also already have used the different perspectives. So we will look at what is the perspective which we are interested in, okay, and how we can navigate within the studio. So we'll start from that. and then we will upload tables, and then we will move on from there. Okay, so that will be our next session. Yes.
Raghu, just a quick question. So now, if somebody asks me what is the difference between S/4 HANA versus S4 HANA, so what you just explained is S/4 HANA is more of a suite versus S4 HANA is
No,
the
there is
latest.
no. S/4 is called as S4.
Okay.
Okay, so there is no difference.
This is so related videos are popping at YouTube. Like, describe the difference between what is S/4 HANA versus S4. So I
No,
thought
it's the same.
S4, I can say that that's the latest ASA web. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's S4.
Just,
We call it as
Praveen.
S4. You can write it as S4 or S/4 or whatever.
Got it.
Praveen,
Okay.
it's just a generation of ERP. You know,
Fourth
this
generation.
is for
fourth
the
generation.
generation, and HANA is the database. This is the simple term you can use. You know, S4 is fourth generation, and HANA is the database, and fourth generation is running on HANA database. That's it. As simple as that.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can wind up for today. I hope it was informative.
It was indeed. Thank you, Raghu.
Thank
Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Raghu.
Let's
Thanks.
We'll see each other tomorrow.